Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Journey to Purpose. With me this week, I have the talented and wonderful Dee Dee Fisher. Dee Dee is a communications expert and founder of Discover Response. She has more than 30 years' experience guiding leaders and teams to overcome challenges by focusing on compassion, process, and continuous learning. Dee Dee, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
The pleasure is all mine. The first very easy question is, where in the world are you?
I am in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. by about 4 miles.
It's a wonderful part of the world. I was just discussing earlier how I lived out there as well, so very jealous.
Yeah, I think it's very fun to come and do your time in the district, or the DMV, as we like to call it. And people will say, you live at the Department of Motor Vehicle? I'm like, no. In this little area, it stands for District, Maryland, Virginia. Yes.
That's the one. Perfect. So very simple question to start back with. So who are you? What is a communication expert? How did you get there? Tell us more.
Sure. Okay. So I left Idaho, which is a very rural place in the United States of America. And I knew that I went to college and I knew I wanted business to be different than business was, because I had grown up in a family owned business where I watched individuals think they were communicating, but they weren't really communicating. Right. So always stating their point of view, but never really like having a dialogue that figured the meaning out. So I didn't put together the larger conversation or the larger business structure that has become my life until later. But that was the very first thing, was I just want business to look different. Like, it doesn't have to be like this. So I thought that was psychology. So it was my junior year, my advisor came to me, Dr. Joe, and he said, so DeeDee, what will you do if you have a female client whose husband is abusing her? And I said, well, I'm going to tell her to leave. And he's like, that's exactly why you cannot be a therapist. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She should leave. He's like, well, should leave, but she has to come to that. You can't tell her what to do. And he's like, so I've already talked to a new advisor for you. And I think you need to go down to mass communications and get your degree in advertising and PR and go be you, because you're great. But this process of sitting in therapy and slow playing till your client gets it, really going to be too slow for you. And I'm like, wow, such an insight, right? Such an amazing advisor, right? He did all the footwork. He did all of it for me. So I went from Idaho to Arizona and I got a job for a company that consulted all the major corporations in the Valley. And the Valley being the Phoenix Valley of the Sun. It's what that people like to call it. Boeing, Intel, McDonnell Douglas. And what we did was we took executives and we taught them a 5-step program, from team building to time management, communication style. And so it was our job, as the salesperson, to work with the leader, figure out what they wanted, then take the platform that our founder had developed and apply it inside. But really, where my sweet spot was always in the communication part. And I always thought we should change it all. The founder wanted to do time management. And I'm like, no, because you really can't talk about time if you can't communicate. So we were always arguing over. I'm like, no, we need to do the communication first. And then I went on a wild journey. I left that company. I went to work in the nutraceutical business, which is making vitamins. I developed and made a product for general nutrition. I made it for myself, and then I pitched it to find a partner. And I found a partner in general nutrition centers. And they bought the product from me, shelved it, and I got to write all the ads, do all the communication
Oh,
part, right?
amazing.
Yeah, it was
That's
so
cool.
fun. Yeah, it was so fun. I got to put like a whole program in the bottle, but it always started with the communication to yourself. Like, what are you saying to yourself about your health? What are you doing for yourself about the health? Because yes, this vitamin is great, but it's not going to solve the whole issue. There's something going on behind the scenes that would have you not be healthy in the first place. And when the very first time I really realized that the communication piece, like the thread, started showing up in my life, was I pitched it to Oprah. And this is in the late 90s. And Gail was still working for her. So Gail King was who I talked to. And Gail said, look, we're never going to promote an ingestible. It's just too much liability. And I go, I get that. But, it was a great conversation. And she's like, but I want to tell you that you're writing inside the bottle in the program is what people, especially women, need to hear. So it was the first time somebody had said, this is what's important, like your communication style. Then the second person after that project was over was a professor from the University of Virginia at the Darden Business School. He met me. We started talking, and he said, "Wait a minute. You're from Idaho? I'm from Idaho. Nobody leaves Idaho." And I'm like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "So what are you doing?" And I tell him, and he says, "Oh my gosh, I'm writing a book on entrepreneurs. I want to put you in the book, because how does a girl who got a communication degree, who leaves the place I know you left, create a vitamin with no chemistry background, no bio background, and then put it in one of the biggest chains in the US?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I just did." Right? He's like, "Yes, that's what makes you an entrepreneur." So I did the case study, I did the book. Then I took some time off and I had a child. And then it was about 5, 6 years ago that I started really looking like, where's the thread in my career and what do I want to go back to doing full time? Why I hadn't, or I was always doing stuff, nonprofit work, like coaching with kids, whether that was athletic or whether that was like communication, writing, stuff like that. So it was always active, but really jumping back in full time. So I just investigated, started working with some new clients like I had in the past. And these clients very quickly started saying, "I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about team building. I want to talk about the way you speak." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Right. And so they started saying, "Well, I hear you say things differently." And I'm like, "Okay, like what?" And this one guy was like, "Well, like you're always all over me to stop saying the word try." And I'm like, "Yeah, stop. Like, have you ever tried to stand up or tried to take your glasses off?" And I love that you're in Britain because I use this with my clients a lot. Give it a go,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
You can give something a go, but you cannot try to do something. You're either doing it or not, or you're
You're
even
not.
giving it a go or you're not. So I listened to my clients and they were like, "I want you to teach me how to communicate better." But like, I was like, "But lots of people say that." And they're like, "Right. Lots of people say that, but there's no process. We always are saying communicate better." So I said, "Okay, what industry is running our life?" Question to myself. Tech. Tech is running our life. So I went and got Scrum certified. And in that process, I realized my brain loves linear equations. And what they were doing, I was already doing with my clients. Okay, we would set something up and then I'd have them go meet with their team. Then they would come back to me and tell me how it went. And then we would decide what they wanted. Then they would go back with their team. So I was basically teaching them to run a Scrum communication without even having a formula. Just innately, I could see that we needed to be doing that in communication. Where what most executives are doing is like they give their team a like, "Go do this," and then they check back in a month later. And if that very first message was misheard or
Mm-hmm.
misspoken, like just whatever the disconnect was for the intent of the project, it could be completely wrong and they wasted 30 days. So we quickly realized that what we're going to do is do that, basically do a scrum with communication. So then
I
I
love
came up,
that.
yeah, and then I came up with the formula. And so being compassionate with yourself and the other person, being in process. So that means understanding that communication is a process. Like everybody who listens to a podcast does not think they're going to get all of the podcast in the first 15 seconds, right? It's a process of you ask me questions and I share information and then I share something and you hear something and you ask a different question. That's a process. But we don't do that other places, like in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then the L is learning, like committing to learn about the other person, about ourselves, about the situation that we're creating. And then along the way, I've just worked with some fabulous people who've even taught me more and more and more, who've given me stories, right, from our situations together that have become impactful for the next client.
Mm,
So it's
brilliant.
really a fun journey. I love it so much. And so then I've tagged, like, I really love it, right? Like, it's like, like somebody who loves to cook. Like, I'm like, I love it so much. Like, my 18-year-old, she's like, "You've always been doing this." She's like, "You've
Yeah,
never not been doing this, mom."
I think that's such a gift, though. I mean, going back to when you're in your 20s and talk about formula. You're the only person I've had on my podcast go, "I love linear equations." That's fantastic. I'm going to frame that somewhere. But um, but there is a formula for society, which is, get an education, go to college, get a job, all the rest of it. And I'm sure you see this, and what I see is that we don't necessarily find our passions, or we don't focus on our passions until later in life because we're too busy following that formula. But actually, the fact that you love communications is that even if you didn't know it, you were fortunate enough to have that passion early on and follow it. I think that's just an amazing gift to have had. But one of the things I want to ask you about your formula, and the first one being compassion. And how often do you find people think they're being compassionate by waiting for their turn to speak, but actually that's not really compassion. That's just polite interaction. Do you see that quite a lot?
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I'm wanting people to do a little more work than just be polite, right? I want them to
Right.
actually, so like compassion in in this formula, and in the like, function of working beyond your reaction in a dialogue, is about, we as humans always make something up about other humans, right?
Mm.
Like, I like to use the person in the car who pulls out in front of you, and then you're blaring, and you lived in the DMV, like, horns are like, if it's not going off every second, you think something happened, right? So you honk,
Right.
the person pulls out in front of you, you're honking your horn, you're screaming whatever you're screaming, and then you get up there and it's like a little old lady driving who can barely see over the steering wheel, right? And then you feel like a turd. That's what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and we all do it. We all make up like the worst thing first. It's always like this. Like, it's just, we're constantly making up the worst thing first. So the very
Mm.
first step is make up something positive, because the fact of the matter is that negative thing you made up is no more true than the positive thing you could train yourself to make up.
Yeah.
Oh, they must be running late. They needed to go fast, pulled out in front of me. I hate it when I'm running late. It's no problem. I can slow down a little bit. I got you. Right? Like, just one little thing. And I always say that it's like if you're baking a cake and you decide to put cocoa in it, it's no longer a white cake, right? So only one piece has to change the entire dialogue. Even if the dialogue is just occurring inside yourself, you now didn't honk your horn, scream and wave your whatever at this little old lady. So it also
Yeah.
changed her life without her ever knowing it.
That's an amazingly simple view, and yet we don't do it, as you say. Like, and I know, I mean, for those who don't know why, we are wired to be negative. This is a protective measure. But the way it manifests in modern society is obviously like honking horns and being angry and everything else. And I love that actually what you're teaching here is not just, about in that moment, but it's kind of a message for life, which is the cup is half full. What is the other way of seeing things? Let's go for the positive. And you're right, that does take training, but you can do it. Anyone can do it. It just has to be a conscious decision. And then I guess that links nicely to your next pillar around the learning and kind of looking around how we apply that. But I guess you're looking also for you're committing to the act of investigation. But what are we investigating in a difficult conversation, do you feel?
I think we're investigating, like, why is it difficult? Like, what can I do to make it not difficult? And if I, like, a lot of times if you react in a conversation, then the conversation's really over, right? And if you
Mm.
need to have that conversation, whether it's with a partner, a parent, a child, your boss, like whoever it is, you really need to stay in it. So we don't walk away making up the negative thing about each other, and we actually have a dialogue that creates relatedness, even if you disagree. Like, it's okay to disagree about something, but like respectfully disagree.
Mm. One of your clients said that he lost his job, was at a crossroads, and he helped him reinvent himself. So what does it look like when someone actually arrives at those crossroads, and what are they actually communicating to themselves? And I think this is linked back to that investigation, that compassion. I think there's a bit of
Right.
self-compassion there, isn't there? But tell me about that.
Well, right. Because when you arrive someplace like that, you think, what did I do wrong? How did I get here? I must be broken, right? There's all these things that come up inside of, this is not where I thought I would be at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Instead of just get rid of all of that, and really focus on your talent, focus on your abilities, focus on the great people that might be able to help you, focus on the thread of your career. Who's said great things about you? Can you go find them? Can you ask them for advice? Can you get direction, right? And instead of like having one event change this whole great career because it felt so impactful, honestly, because most of the time the negative thing only happens once or twice in our lives if you're talking about a
Mm-hmm.
career. But this amazing career, we have it be the whole thing instead of like, because we are wired to look at the negative part, right? Like, we're just humanly
Absolutely.
wired to look at that.
I love that. I think, again, we we generalize as humans, we catastrophize as humans. And so I love how you're teaching people to step back and to challenge it and go, well, is it everything? Was it just one moment in time? That's a really important lesson. But something I wanted to link it to something else you also do. So I know you have your YouTube channel around narcissism and gaslighting, and obviously that's a part of communication. But how did that come about? Because you say your professor said don't do psychology, but it feels like a lot of what you have is psychology, right?
Right. So, so the narcissistic YouTubes that I did was with a friend who has started a company, called Beyond Betrayal or After Betrayal, Life After Betrayal. That's what it's called, Life After Betrayal. She's this amazing woman, and she does have her counseling certificate. So she is a counselor, but she saw some of my work and she was reading some of my LinkedIn posts, and she called and said, I really want to talk to you about how this could apply to this situation, right? To betrayal, and not just like intimate betrayal, but any kind of betrayal, because it is so emotionally exciting, right? Like you get so upset,
Mm.
and we immediately have it be about us, betrayal situation. Like, I must be broken. I must be not lovable. I must be not pretty. I must be something wrong with me for that person to do what they did. And these women she was working with, we really wanted them to be able to stop and see that if that person had been, let's just say that instead of like intimate betrayal, they'd have been sitting in the closet eating Snickers bars and gaining weight, you wouldn't have equated that to you. And how about we have shift that mindset and put the responsibility back over there with the action instead of the emotional fallout, right? And then, of course, the
Mm.
person who's doing the thing that hurts you always wants to defend their actions. And so then you also have to stop and function beyond your reaction, right? Else you're both just reacting against the reaction. They get caught, you react, and then they react to your reaction. And then there's no dialogue ever happening, right? And nobody can get past that. So the first thing is, what she wanted to do is create a way for them to see it and have compassion for themselves. And that's why she likes
Hmm.
it so much. So we're teaching them to like be compassionate for themselves in that situation, and understand that there was a process to get where they got in their marriage or relationship, and that there was a process to either fix it or to exit it, but it didn't have to happen like that,
Mm.
right? Like, stay in the process, and then what can you learn? What can you learn about yourself? Even if you learn something about yourself to take onto another relationship, being able to stay in the most, I think as humans, we have that as one of the betrayal is one of the most difficult things to function beyond, especially if you're being blamed for that person's
Mm.
action. Like, we are never responsible for another person's actions. Like, absolutely never. They always say the second foul is the one that gets called, right? Like in sports. So like there's a basketball game and somebody elbows somebody, right, on purpose to get to the hoop. But the foul that gets called is the secondary one, is the reaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's like that in relationships too. Everybody wants to focus on that thing. Well, no, we need to go back just to the original thing. Let's just stick there.
I mean, I love it, but it's so hard, isn't it? Because when particularly with things like narcissism and gaslighting, when you are at the culmination of a process by somebody else. But
Yes.
then again, that I guess it isn't just in those situations where you have that effect. You have that in your everyday life. You have that we are at the culmination of a process by the way society works. And
Yes.
so I love how you make your clients and make us pause to reflect for a moment with that compassion. So the first thing being, am I being kind to myself? What does this mean for me? And going back to that basic principle of the only thing I can control is myself.
Exactly.
That is it. And people forget that. But so in reality, we talk about this a lot in other places, we all know rationally that the only thing I can control is myself. But emotionally, we don't want that to be true. So going back to your framework then, how have you found ways to implement that so people feel like they are taking back control?
So first of all, you have to stop and breathe, and maybe you even be so responsible as you say, I'm not going to have this conversation right now, even if it's your boss. Wow, I didn't realize I was so off the mark, right? Give me 15, 20 minutes to go take some notes and let me come back to you. Walk away from the initial reaction, because whatever work you probably did was great. It just wasn't the work they were looking for, right? It wasn't what they were
Mm-hmm.
expecting. Doesn't mean that what you did is terrible. It just wasn't the predicted outcome. But I think being able to actually stop and say, I need just a minute, and be compassionate with ourselves in those situations and just ask for what we need. And even a lot of times I tell my clients, it's okay to tell one on yourself, right? I don't do very well in high, loud, volatile conversations. Can you just give me a minute to walk away? You take a minute, I'll be right back. Give me 15
Mhm.
minutes. And just tell one
I
on yourself.
I think that takes a lot of emotional intelligence. I know that's something that you've been said to have a high amount of. Do you think you can learn emotional intelligence? Do you think there's an innate bit, nature, nurture, bit of both?
I think it's a muscle. I think it's just like any other muscle that we work because maybe you like think about our brains. Like maybe you don't like math, but if you had somebody teach you right down to
Mhm.
the basics, you could learn how to do math of any kind and figure it out as long as it was broken down into the smallest piece and that you could
Mhm.
practice it, right? So I consider this work, it's like working out. You have to work the muscle. You have to work the muscle of compassion and then you have to be accepting of the process and you have to commit to the learning. And so all of those things are active. And so it is a muscle. And then you just keep working it and working it. And nobody's perfect right out the door, but it's better to give it a go and get something different than not give it a go and just get the same thing you've always done.
Yeah. Well, that definition of insanity to repeat the same thing, expect a different outcome, right? So that makes sense.
Exactly.
H- how do you work your emotional empathy muscle then? What do you do?
I do the piece that we talked about earlier. I always make up something positive because I don't know the negative thing to be true. So I just make up anything. And in the moment I just let my mind do it. It could be something super silly, right? Like they put their pants on wrong this morning and then they got halfway out the house and they're like, he must have walked out, if you meet somebody in a restaurant totally nasty and they're like, wow, I guess maybe she had toilet paper on her shoe and somebody told her and now she's really embarrassed. I mean, just like I try to add humor to it, quite honestly, if you can hear that. Like I try to be funny because I think the negative stuff we make up is quite comical,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's like for me, nobody leaves the house hoping to get in the car to do their commute and do the worst job they've ever done.
That's very true.
Nobody thinks that. Or like, I'm going to go to work and do the worst job I've ever done. No, everybody gets up hoping to have a great day, do their best, feel satisfied at the end. We are all basically the same as humans, right? We want to feel great
Yeah.
about how we spend our hours, want to get a good night's sleep, want to spend time with our family after it's all done, and we want to feel good when we hit the pillow.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
It
yeah. So work the muscle and try to make it, and I do my best to make it humorous for
Alright,
myself.
I'm gonna now try and come up with humorous reasons why people do behave the way they do. So there we go. I love that.
I was just gonna say, the one I laugh at the hardest, and I always want to I literally want to get out of my car. I know driving is something that happens to all of us, so I think I have a lot of examples of that. But I want to open my door and walk to the car behind me and say, "So the mom with the baby in the stroller, and I wanted to turn right. You wanted me just to run over them? Like what was the what did you actually want me to do? Because I know you can't see them, but I want to also turn right. If I could turn right, I would be turning right. It's so like that whole linear thing. You know how I said my brain just I'm like the irrational, circular nonsense we do. I'm like, just calm down. It's just driving. It's just turning right. As soon as I can turn right, I will, but without killing the lady and her baby. I'm not going to do that.
I feel this is a good life choice to make. It's a strong one.
But it's so funny. And so when I'm sitting in the car and there's somebody crossing and the guy behind me is blaring on his horn, I literally am laughing. And
Yeah.
they don't know that right now they're actually telling me to turn right and there's all these people. They wouldn't be honking their horn if they knew that. So for me, it gets to be ridiculous, which for me is
Yeah.
funny.
I love that. So when I can't remember how, maybe I was in my late 20s, I was really, really ill. And I had about 6 weeks of work. And I remember coming back thinking, oh God, what are people going to think? And in the nicest possible way, and cared when I came back. Not because they're horrible people, but because life goes on. And that was a really good lesson for me to learn, which was people think about you a lot less than you think they do. Not in a horrible way, but we all think about our own stuff. But with your growth and your compassion, that is very much an inward focus exercise in the first place. So do you have these moments with your clients when they almost have their epiphany? Because you often go into these kind of exercises thinking that someone else is at fault. And you have to have that moment where you go, oh, wait, it is all about me. Like, I am the person here who can change this. What does that look like when you see that with your clients?
My favorite story is about this, like, because it happened with somebody who was about 14 years old. So I did, during COVID, I was lecturing online, and I was lecturing to 100 people. And so it was junior high kids and their teachers. So mostly students, right?
Yeah.
So all of this happens inside of this person who's talking. I did the lecture, we talked about the tool, and then I took questions. And this girl said, okay, I have a question for you, Miss Dee Dee. And I said, okay. She's like, so there's this group of girls and they're always saying negative things about. I said, okay. And she said, but I get so mad. And then I say something back, and then the bullying ensues, right? So this verbal bullying that she's got going on. She said, what you're telling me is I can choose to be compassionate with myself and choose that what they're saying is not true.
Mm-hmm.
To look at them and decide whether they're like a valued person in my life who's giving me creative feedback about my behavior, or are they just being not nice, and I can literally ignore it. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm telling you. And she said, so I'm in control of what goes inside my brain. I go, yes. And she said, that means I could never be bullied again. Like, that aha moment for me, like,
Wow.
to see her
Yeah.
get it, like, to that,
Yeah.
like, that she did the work sitting there thinking about it. And I'm like she saw it. She was compassionate with herself. She saw the process. She committed to it. Like, she kept going until her brain was like, I'm in total control of who bullies me and who not. Like, on a verbal level, right? We're not talking like physical violence, but we're talking when people say things that she realized she was in complete control. And her life from that moment on till whatever adult she becomes will never be the same. Like, that moment's just so priceless to me.
That is something special for sure. And it's really sad that we take so long to learn that. And do you, with all the clients you've seen, all the things you've done, do you have any theories as to why it takes us so long to understand that we are in control of our own destinies?
Yeah, I think it starts with our parenting. It's the parenting, it's the way teachers talk to kids. And so we go into an unknown environment with unknown people from the age of 6 when you go to kindergarten, right? And
Mm.
everybody has a different way of verbally speaking. But if you think back, the teachers, professors, coaches who made the biggest difference, they're the ones who were more investigative. They asked more
Mm-hmm.
questions. How do you learn? How can I help you? What can I do to support you? Comparatively to the people who are quite often, like, I lectured a lot at the local high school, and that they would tell me when somebody says to me, just do better, I'm literally doing the best I can in this
Mm.
whatever class, and my brain is not getting it. So I can't just do better. It's like, just communicate better, right? There has to be
Yeah.
a process, right? So if when we rear little humans, we use this tool that obviously I got out of ad and PR, right? But it's so magical, the who, what, when, where, why, how, that all journalists use. I mean, people want to know, like, how come Barbara Walters can get people just to talk about everything? It's very simple. Who, what, when, where, why, how. It's like, it is not magic. It's just be in an inquisitive mode instead of I know
Mm.
everything and you should do it the way I think, right? So imagine
Yeah.
parenting like that. Why was the class challenging for you? Why did you get a D in algebra? How can I help you? What can I do to support you? Right? And be in investigation with our little people, our small humans, which also trains us to be different. Yes, some of the most magical things have happened when I'm donating my time and doing students. And it can be even, I lecture at ASU in Arizona a lot, and I have amazing stories from people in class who talk to me about things during class after the lecture. And even from that age, so like 25 or even later if they're getting their MBA. But that aha moment of, wow, I just assumed that my boss knew what I knew. And then we had this whole great big argument. And in the end, we figured out that we weren't talking about the same thing at all.
I love that. I was just reflecting for a moment. So my bachelor's was in history and Russian, and I adore history. The reason I adore history is because I had an amazing history teacher in school who, like you said, was not your standard. And I had him from UK schools slightly different from the age of 11 to 14. So that's when you take your first major exams. And after that, I got a terrible, terrible teacher. Like he was your classic drone on history. But by that point, I loved history so much, I didn't care what he did. Like the foundation had been laid for my love of history, and I still love it today, and though my master's is in neuroscience and psychology, but part of me goes, I could just do another master's in history because like history is cool, man. But that I think is, to your point, the effect of like a really good teacher, coach, leader, whoever it is, like they do leave an imprint on your life. And I can, same for my army though, like I can name like 2 colonels who I want to be like when I grow up because they were just brilliant and in so many ways. And part of that though was communication. It was how they were with me, with each other, with my peers, with people below me. But I never thought of it in those terms. I never thought about the communication aspect. I just thought like they were good leaders. But I can see with sort of what you've said, it was how they communicated with me that made the difference.
Nothing happens without communication.
100%. I mean, I get it. And I think, well, I get it now better having talked to you for this moment. Thank you very much. But also, I think, it reinforces what you say about communication drives growth and realizing those gaps. But we also, I think, and I don't know if you agree with this, take communication for granted, the ability to communicate. And I had a lady on a few months ago who she works with the deaf community. She is a translator and her parents were deaf. And again, we don't realize how much of a gift communication is, and yet we waste it when we can do it freely as we are now. And is there anything that you would change, I guess, about the education system or about the work system and how we would approach that?
Yeah. So I don't know about in Europe or the UK, but in the United States, there is on the West Coast. So, because, California, there's certain things move west to east and other things move east to west in the US. So in California, there's a movement, social emotional learning.
Right.
And that's where I had my daughter when she was young. And they
Mhm.
do communicate more inquisitively with children and get them speaking. So even by first grade, they have them standing in front of the room giving speeches and communicating
Oh,
because
wow.
they take away all the stuff we make up about that, right? And
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
basically they don't download. I always Humans are like little computers, right? I mean, we didn't have computers, we made them, but we come empty, right? We just born into the world, and then stuff gets downloaded on our hard drive, truth or not truth, and then we contain it as truth. And so if somebody says,
Mm.
from the minute you could walk, speaking in public is scary, and guess what you're going to have? Speaking in public is
Mm.
scary, right? So they just take all of that stuff away and they really focus on their verbiage with children. And I love that. And you can get your master's as a school in California, you can go get it and get your master's. But if we could get more of that, like, integrated into the system, instead
Mm.
of it being that like someone like me writes a book and then I go lecture and then maybe I can write a program and I get it into the school. It's like, how about we just completely revamp education and we
Mm.
start from the beginning and we just instilled one tool, and it was the who, what, when, where, why, how. Anytime any child had an issue, just one tool.
I mean, I love that. It reminded me, one of my friends with their daughter, they taught her sign language before, not like a whole thing, but when she was a child, before she could speak clearly. So that when she couldn't verbalize what she was trying to say, she had the signs for it instead. And I can't say that it was percentage better or worse than children who didn't have it, but it's definitely something that we see in the UK more and more, is this idea of there's baby sign classes, and the idea being that you're giving the children tools to communicate before their vocal abilities develop.
Well, what is interesting about that is they say that the human child understands what we're saying long before we think they do, because
Right.
they simply don't have the tools yet. Like, their linguistics tools are not there, but they have the capacity to understand from an extremely young age. With
So
my
you need,
daughter, I just allowed her to make up signs on her own, and if you watch, they'll do that, and I just didn't correct it.
right.
So we just used what she made up. And like, more was this, like, like she would move her hand like this. That was more if she wanted more of something. So, I mean,
Oh,
little things. So I completely agree with teaching some kind of languaging before the apparatus from here down is ready to go. It would change a lot of
yeah.
things and be I mean, I actually believe when you see a toddler throwing a tantrum, it's probably because they need something like they can't communicate, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Because you
yeah.
see, you ever work with children who like are on the spectrum and don't have vocal ability? They're frustrated when they can't communicate. So they might be 16, but they're reacting just like a young child would when they can't communicate.
Yeah. It's interesting. My goddaughter, her mum's a nurse. And for like from the age of about 4, my goddaughter would be like making sandwiches and cooking because Ruby's like, her mum was like, well, she's got to learn, and here's a knife, go for it. If it's not a catastrophic bleed, we're fine. But the thing that interesting with my goddaughter was if she ever had a tantrum, and she didn't really have tantrums, but she did just like had a bit of a meltdown. It was always, we knew, because she was just overtired. Like, and again, she couldn't express herself in any other way. And I never saw her. I still don't see her. She's a teenager now, so she definitely doesn't do it anymore. She's now into moody teenager phase, but that's fine. Um, but but I think because Jo, her mum, is a nurse, was so good with the communication side of things, and just also the empowerment as well of like, here's a knife. Don't cut yourself, but if you do, we'll put a plaster on it. It's fine, or a band-aid
Yeah.
in American.
Yeah.
That does make a difference, and I see, and I it's not that I judge because I don't have children, but I see the different parenting styles of my friends around me with children. And I think I'm very blessed that all my friends look like they're really good parents. They're all a bit different, but the theme throughout is that empowerment of communication. It's trusting them to do the thing they're being asked to do, and not hanging over them, and not being like, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Just go and do it. And if it goes wrong, that's
Yeah.
cool. We can learn from it."
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay. There's a book called The Blessing of Skin Knees. It's a parenting book called The Blessing of Skin Knees.
Nice. Feel like I need to go and look that out.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Yeah, I think, that would like I just think that would be such a dream to be able to integrate my tool into like the school system.
Yeah.
Like that just the change that you see in children when you ask them questions. I mean,
Yeah,
there is no way what my daughter at 18 is going through in high school is like what I went through in high school.
for
I mean
sure.
let's just start
The
with
world
shelter,
has
right?
changed. Yeah,
Everything's
yeah.
right? Everything's different. So let's just start there. And so there's no way I could understand unless she attempts to explain to me everything she's going through. And that is not a 30-second conversation. That's a sit down and have a conversation for however long it
Mm.
takes.
One of the things that we talk about in the UK is sitting down at dinner and eating. And so my parents we always had dinner together. We always had breakfast together. We ate our meals together, and we would discuss the day. Now, as we got older, we'd read books because, again, pre-computers, we'd all be at the table reading a book together. But there's studies that say that this isn't happening as much. Like, again, it's that communication loss. Do you see that as a good? Well, does it matter the way that we do communication in terms of, do we need to have these social settings, the one-on-one settings, or is it just important that we communicate in some way at all?
Well, I think that social setting is just a habit, right? It's a like, this is when it's always going to occur. So we have
Mm,
sit down dinners in my house too, because I grew up with a family that did that. So we do sit down dinners. And it's just always like, and that's when it's going to happen. So you
right.
don't have to figure out. I know other families that like say their kids play multiple sports and so they're never home for dinner. They're always running. They do it on Sundays or they do it on Saturday nights, right? They actually, everybody on the couch, sit down and have like everybody, for however long it takes, everybody talks about their week. What do we need to work through? What happened? What came up? Can we help you? So I do think that using the muscle however you can is imperative for
Mm,
rearing children. Probably imperative for relationships, right?
definitely. I mean, one thing my husband and I have had to do, and I'm sure everyone does, is we have had to work on our communication a lot. When it's good, it's very, very good. And when it's bad, we want to blame each other. And so we have to remember
Of course.
there are two halves to everything. But again, we have learned we have learned when we're both tired, we are not good to be around each other when we're both tired. And so we try to recognize, and we have to constantly go, now I'm really tired. Like today, I don't have the energy to do this. Let's do this tomorrow when I've had some sleep. And we do that now. Whereas before, we might have snapped at each other and just got
Yeah.
grumpy with each other. And again, it's understanding that I'm not actually annoyed at him. I'm just tired. I don't have the energy to deal with whatever we want to deal with, and
Yeah.
owning that I'm the problem in that situation.
Yeah. Well, and maybe not even a problem. You're just tired.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know we have a rule, no intense conversations after 9:30.
That's a good rule. I might take
Right?
that rule.
And if something comes up, hey, I really need to talk about this. Let's put it on the calendar. And we have a family shared calendar. put it on the calendar for tomorrow night during dinner.
Nice.
Like, so you don't forget that you want to talk about it.
Yeah. The other thing that we do, which is probably bad, is we somehow get into deep conversations when one of us is driving and the other one isn't, which
Yeah.
actually probably isn't great because like one only has half the concentration in the conversation. And so we learned this. We're like, okay, wait, we're doing this thing again. Let's pause this conversation so you can focus on driving and not beat the old ladies who are trying to get their life sorted as well.
Yeah. But the best driving tool is drive your kids, right? Like if you drive your kids, you've learned so much. Like because
Right, you're from
especially if they're in the back seat with other friends,
chatting away.
and they think you're not paying attention because you're driving because they're not old enough to drive yet in those situations. It's the best. Or if my daughter's upset, I'll be like, hey, let's go jump in the car and get a snack. Well, as soon as I get in and like both of us are like subconsciously focused on something else, she'll start
Mhm.
talking about whatever
Right,
the thing is.
yeah.
And I just like, oh, that's very interesting. I don't point out, we're talking about that thing now.
So what we're
I just
saying
let
here
it
is
happen, right? Just
right,
let it
yeah.
happen.
So deep marriage conversations when driving, a big no. Children conversations when driving, a big yes. There we
Yes.
go.
Yeah. Yes. Because
I love that.
I don't know what happens. They just breathe or
Something.
something. It's very
It's
interesting.
true.
And moms will talk about it. Like they'll be the moms like on a drive. I learned so much.
These are all the trade secrets everyone needs to know. Conscious of time. So if people are struggling with communication and they don't know how to start, good step one is compassion. So what is the first thing they should do in that moment for themselves?
So if I was going to give people one tool, and they didn't want to just walk away. So like the first step was if you can, put the whole conversation on hold with whoever it is and be compassionate that you need that just like you do when you're tired, right? But the number one tool that people ask me, what's the number one thing you like? Ask why. So like if you're triggered and it's probably because you don't understand something or because your brain took it in as triggering, just say why I don't understand, right? And it shifts the dynamic because you now, oh, yeah, I probably don't understand and I'm upset. And the other person has the opportunity to backtrack and be in a different conversation than where they were. And so it can start the dialogue differently if you can't stop and walk away for a minute. Why do you feel that way? Why is that the process? I didn't think of that, right? I statements are so important. So why did you think about it that way? Because I didn't even consider that way, right? Especially at work. You wanted the project done that way. Why? Because I didn't even consider it being done that way, right? It didn't even pop into my brain.
Love that. Thank you. DeeDee, it's been wonderful. If people want to work with you, learn more about you, read any of your stuff, how can they find you?
All social media channels, but LinkedIn is the very best. So Dee Dee Fisher on LinkedIn and Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. My TikTok's pretty fun. I do some more fun stuff on TikTok. Put some fun things up there. But yeah, it's all Dee Dee Fisher, just like it sounds. DEEDE and Fisher with no C, I like to say. And you'll find me.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that all goes in the show notes as well. DeeDee, thank you ever so much once again. I wish you well and I really appreciate the time you've given today.
Thank you so much for having me. So exciting to talk about this and love that you're international and then we get to do this like reaching across the world thing. Love technology.
Tech is awesome, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.